Good morning, everyone. I'm Eli. Welcome to Healthy Living with Dr. EE. All of us want good health, and it's never too late to take action. Now, before we begin, please be reminded that the content is copyrighted. No recording or sharing is allowed. Let us all welcome our special guest for today, Dr. EE Zhang.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your Saturday morning to listen to me talk. And it's a really sunny Saturday morning as well. So thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for showing up.
Dr. EE, could you tell us a bit about the trends in cancer and why rates seem to be rising?
Sorry, guys, I have a little bit of a tech issue here that I'm trying to fix. All right. Sorry, I fixed my tech issue on my end. That was entirely my fault. So let's continue on. So over here, we're going to be talking about cancer. We're going to be exploring into, what exactly is it, what we can do about it. So, when we're talking about cancer, I feel like what a lot of people are wondering first is, well, why do some people get cancer and others don't? So I feel like this is one of the main questions that people may wonder when it comes to cancer. But I feel like to really understand it first, we have to really understand what cancer is. So let me go into an introduction of what cancer is. Cancer is a very generic term referring to a really huge group of diseases that can happen in or affect any part of the body. It occurs when the body cells start to multiply uncontrollably and spread to other parts of the body. So the body is just made up of trillions of cells. And normally these cells, they have their own sort of life cycle, meaning that, the cell is created, it lives its life, and then at the end of its natural life, it dies. So, they get old, they get damaged, and they die, and they are replaced by a fresh new cell. But if this process breaks down, then these cells become a little bit abnormal and they continue growing when they shouldn't, instead of dying. Now, in our body cells, we have a lot of checks and balances to make sure that, cells follow through on this natural life cycle and they don't, multiply uncontrollably. So when these cells start multiplying uncontrollably, when they start overcoming all of these, check-ins to limit this sort of growth, then you get a tumor. All right, but just because it's a tumor doesn't mean that it's cancer, because tumors can also be benign, meaning that they're not cancerous. Cancerous tumors, also known as malignant tumors, are tumors that will invade into nearby tissues and spread throughout the body in a process known as metastasis. So most causes of cancer death are due to, these cancer cells spreading throughout the body, being where they really shouldn't. And if you've got cells that are where they shouldn't be, they're not doing its normal job, it's interfering with the job of the normal cells already there, well, you're going to get a lot of issues. Now, cancer cells, you can think of them as sort of like zombie cells. They look really weird underneath the microscope. They look really, really abnormal, sort of like how zombies would look. They multiply uncontrollably. They don't have any checks and limits because, normally when you have a normal cell in your body, for example, a skin cell stays a skin cell. It does the job of a skin cell. It doesn't, grow uncontrollably and start invading the little structures deep beneath. So, if you have a skin cell, it's not going to start invading into your muscles, into the deeper parts of, your arm or your hand or anywhere you've got skin. It stays in its little place there. But cancer cells don't do that. They invade. And the scary thing about cancer cells is that they are essentially immortal. They don't have that natural stop to their lifespan. So, they're causing a lot of problems here. And unfortunately, cancer rates are increasing over time. Every time someone goes to the doctor, even for a simple problem, it's just going to hover in the back of your mind, like, what if it's cancer? You go into the doctor for a headache, and if you've got anxiety, if you're the type of person who really worries about it, then in the back of your mind it's just like, what if I have cancer? So, a lot of people, they'll just be like, no, it's not gonna be that. It's not gonna happen, at least not to them, right? But unlike other terrifying diseases, cancer is actually really quite common. It's the second leading cause of death in the world after heart disease. And in 2018, there was an estimated 9.6 million deaths worldwide due to cancer. On a global scale, 1 in 6 deaths are due to cancer. So cancer occurs in people of all ages, and it can affect any part of the body. And cancer is a leading cause of death for children as well, because people always think, cancer is an old person's disease. It's never going to happen to someone young, or even if it does happen to someone young, it's not common. So every year there's about 300,000 new cases diagnosed in children. So we're just talking about anyone below the age of 18. About 38% of people will be diagnosed with cancer in their lifetimes. So, people have this impression of cancer as something that happens to someone else, someone older than them, someone with a worse lifestyle than them. And while increasing age is a risk factor for developing cancer and dying from cancer, the reality is people of all ages will get and die from cancer. The most common types of cancer in older adults tend to be, cancers of the skin, the lung, the colon, the breast, and prostate. In younger adults, teenagers, children, the types of cancer, it tends to differ. So it tends to be things like breast cancer, lymphomas, melanomas, sarcomas, cervical, ovarian cancer, thyroid cancers, testicular cancers, still colorectal cancers, or even brain and spinal cord tumors. So, there's a little bit of a difference in the types of cancer you might find in an older population and a younger population. However, the scary thing is that more and more young people are getting cancer. All right, so Singapore's Ministry of Health says that the incident rate of cancer rose faster in individuals under the age of 40 compared to the older age groups. In the United States, data has suggested that there's an alarming 30% increase in cancer diagnosis among young people, so age 15 to 39, between the years 1973 and 2015. So globally, cancer deaths of individuals in their 40s, 30s, or younger has actually increased by 27%. All right, so that's a lot. Worldwide, the number of individuals under 50 diagnosed with cancer has risen by about 80% in the last 30 years. And there's evidence that the cancers in this age group are different from the tumors found in children or in older adults. Although younger cancer patients are more likely to survive the cancer, they're also more likely to suffer long-term complications from the cancer. For example, infertility, heart diseases, or even other types of cancers later on in life. Additionally, just imagine it, you're in the prime of your life. It's such a pivotal stage of your life. It's when a lot of people are gaining more independence, they're starting new careers or new relationships. They're just, really getting started in life, and then being hit with something like cancer. It's going to have a huge, mental and social consequence, and just a huge sort of roll-on effect for the rest of their life as well. It's a serious thing to happen. So there's a lot of explanations out there for why cancer might be increasing. And people are thinking, you know what? Maybe it's just because we've gotten better at finding cancer. We've got better screening techniques. We're more aware of our health. We know what to look for. People are more okay going to the doctors and being like, hey, I want to get checked out for all sorts of things. People are more on top of their health. So people are saying, we're probably just finding it sooner. That's part of it, but that doesn't explain it all. It's likely a combination of all sorts of things. So a combination of like environmental things, of lifestyle factors, as well as, better screening and better ability to diagnose or find cancers. For example, thyroid cancer imaging and diagnostic techniques have improved, which leads to more people getting diagnosed, which, so it doesn't necessarily mean that there's more new cases of thyroid cancers coming up, but more of we're just being able to find it better, which leads to a bump in the numbers, but it's not really, more people getting it. All right, so that contributes a little bit. All right, but it's not everything. Other cancers, on the bright side, have decreased over time, for example, lung cancer and cervical cancer. And this decrease can be attributed to general health measures, for example, reducing smoking rates and the availability of the HPV vaccine, which is really great for reducing the rates of cervical cancer. So studies have shown that, when you get this vaccine, it leads to a nearly 90% reduction rate in cervical cancer in women. So, we are doing a lot to combat cancer, but the numbers are still going up. And part of it is just, due to lifestyle and environmental factors as well. So, cancer still remains one of the more significant health challenges globally, but it's still really concerning that the numbers are going up. The American Cancer Society's 2024 report underscores the severity of the issues. It shows that colorectal and breast cancers as the leading causes of cancer death among men and women under the age of 50. So, it really shows that we do have to keep it in mind, and we have to, keep going on with what we're doing at the moment to fight against cancer. So I wish I could tell you that there's, one single thing that we can focus on for cancer. There's like one single thing that we can eliminate from our lives, and this will just save us from cancer. But unfortunately, it's not that easy because cancer is super, super complicated. There's no one single cause for cancer. Instead, it's the culmination of a lot of things. For example, you got lifestyle choices, you got genetic, disorders or predispositions. You've got exposure to certain viruses, chemotherapy, radiation, your work environment, just even the environment that you live in. You've got pollution, you've got all sorts of things. So everything is related. Excuse me, guys. Just recovering from a little bit of a cough. So a lot of people will think, cancer just comes down to genes. If I got the scary gene, then that means that I definitely am going to get cancer. Or, people will, do all these sort of genetic testings and they think to themselves, well, if I'm doing the test and I don't have the gene, does that mean that I'm definitely not going to get cancer? Well, it doesn't really work like that. Most cancers are not inherited, meaning that most cancers, it doesn't come down solely to these genetic mutations. While these genetic mutations do contribute to some cancers, the majority of cancers are not inherited. So it's only about 5 to 10% are. Sorry. Even individuals with these genetic mutations, it's not guaranteed to develop cancers. So, the next time you do these genetic tests and you see, a scary gene there, don't be too worried about it. Well, it does mean that, you might have a genetic predisposition to developing certain types of cancers. It doesn't 100% mean that you will definitely get it. On the flip side, though, if you don't have this known, genetic mutation that might lead to cancer, doesn't really mean that you're safe either, right? So there are cancers that have a lot of genetic predispositions. For example, you have breast, you've got bowel, you've got stomach, you've got prostate. And these are, just a few. For example, a lot of people out there know that breast cancers have, those scary BRCA1, 2 genes. But, there's a lot of genes out there that can contribute to cancer risk. For example, did you know that in our cells, we have something called tumor suppressor genes? They do exactly as their name says. We're not very creative when it comes to naming things. So, if you have a mutation in these sort of genes, then it can increase your risk of a lot of different types of cancers. All right, but the other thing about genes is that just because you have a gene doesn't mean that it's going to be expressed. A lot of genes have a sort of on-off switch. All right, so you sort of have to trigger your body to express the gene. Or, just because you don't have a mutation doesn't mean that in the future you're just not going to develop a new mutation. Okay, I know it sounds scary, but it's just things that we have to be aware of. So there are a lot of things that can trigger mutations or trigger damage in our cells. And this is what I want to go into. There's a lot of, environmental factors and cancer. And what I want to talk about here is something called radon. So environmental exposures play a significant role in cancer development. So people, when they think environmental factors, they think to themselves, oh, okay, yeah, I know about this already. You're just going to tell me, I don't smoke, don't breathe in car pollution, don't stand next to a coal mine. No. I want to talk about the things that people might not really know of, like something called radon gas. All right, so when I talk about this, a lot of people go like, I don't know what that is. They don't really make the link in their mind of like radon and cancer, because you always hear about the other things. You don't need me telling you about it. So radon is a naturally occurring radioactive gas that comes from the decay of uranium that is also naturally present in the soil. All right. So this is not the cause of pollution. It's not the cause of, human activity. It's just part of nature, part of our environment. All right. So it's in the ground. It's produced by the breakdown of things in the ground, radioactive things in the ground that's there naturally. And it just sort of moves from the ground into the air above the ground. All right, so, it can be found in high concentrations in mines because, you're digging below the ground, basements. It can move its way into buildings. A lot of people think, that buildings are airtight. Buildings are not airtight, all right? You can have cracks in the foundations. You can have, holes in the foundations. It just comes with age. Buildings get old. They develop hairline cracks in the foundation, and gas is gas. It just needs a tiny, tiny space to move through. So as long as you've got these cracks, it can move through these cracks up into the buildings, and it can concentrate on the lower levels like basements. Right? And unfortunately, you can also find it in high concentrations in hot springs. I know, it sounds terrible because, hot springs are so amazing. But so just the next time you're there, you just soak for a little bit, enjoy it for a little bit, but don't spend too long there, okay? And when it comes to, living on the lower floors, hanging out in basements, it's not a huge issue if you have really good ventilation. All right, so you just want to have really good ventilation, really good airflow moving through. Outdoors is not really an issue because it just dissipates outdoors and it gets to really low concentrations. That's not going to cause an issue, right? So, people will think, okay, yeah, so why is this an issue? That's because radon gas can contribute to the rates of lung cancer. So you might have those people and they get lung cancer, and then they tell their doctors, well, why did I get lung cancer? I've never smoked. I don't even hang around people who smoke, so why me? Part of it is because of radon gas exposure, and it accounts for about 3 to 14% of all lung cancers in a country. And we're talking about, the non-smokers are getting lung cancer. Right, and there's other environmental factors to consider as well. For example, you've got air pollution. When you're looking at air pollution, you're particularly looking at the particulate matter. All right, you've got all sorts of chemicals out there. All these things can enter into your respiratory system and just cause damage directly to the cells already there. You have a lot of toxins. For example, you've got the toxins found in tobacco smoke, pesticides, industrial chemicals, etc. And all of these things can also enter the body. And then you've got UV radiation from the sun. I know the sun is responsible for a lot of life on Earth, but it's also, not the safest thing out there. So we want the sun in, limited quantities. So ultraviolet radiation penetrates the skin and it directly damages the DNA in your skin cells. And these damages will just lead to mutations, which in turn can, eventually cause cancer. So each of these factors, independently or together, can lead to these sort of genetic alterations and this breakdown of normal cell regulation that can promote cancer development over time. Another thing that can lead to cancers is, viral infections. For example, the Epstein-Barr virus, HIV, or the human papillomavirus. All right, so each of these things are linked to certain types of cancers. For example, the Epstein-Barr virus can be linked to Burkitt lymphoma, Hodgkin lymphoma, immunoblastic lymphomas, a lot of different lymphomas. Nasopharyngeal cancer, which is just cancer in your nasal cavities back here, and stomach cancer. HPV is linked to cervical cancer, pharyngeal cancer here. Vaginal cancers are all sorts of cancers. HIV is linked to classically Kaposi sarcoma, aggressive B-cell non-Hodgkin lymphomas, and other cancers as well. All right, so next up we have autoimmune disorders and cancer. A lot of people also don't really link this together in their mind, but it does, it does come together because the thing about autoimmune diseases is that you have chronic inflammation. They tend to go hand in hand. All right, and chronic inflammation can stimulate cancer growth. Inflammation can increase blood vessel growth and it can feed cancers. And for a lot of people who have autoimmune diseases, they are taking medications to suppress their immune system, immunosuppressants, because it helps treat the symptoms of the autoimmune diseases, but then it can also increase your cancer risk. All right, so why am I always going on about inflammation, and why am I always going on about gene damage and etc.? Remember what I said before about what cancer is? Cancer is basically a weirdly mutated cell that does not stop growing. That's what cancer is. Okay, it's a mutated cell that does not stop growing. That's cancer. Okay, so it's really important because when our cells multiply, the genes, they all have to be copied. And then when your body copies these genes, it's gonna make mistakes. All right, it's just gonna happen. But luckily, our body has a method of fixing these mistakes. It can go back and it can fix the mistakes if it catches them. It fixes a lot of them, doesn't fix them all. All right, so it's a gamble. Is this mutation in a bad place that will cause cancer, or is it just a harmless mutation that's not really going to do anything? It's a roll of the dice there. All right, so the more mutations you have, the more damage you have to your genes, the more likely it is that you're going to end up with a mutation somewhere in which is going to cause issues. For example, if you end up with a mutation in the tumor suppressor genes, that's going to cause issues. If you end up with a mutation, somewhere because in our genetic code, there's a lot of junk. It doesn't really code for anything. If you end up with a mutation in the middle of the junk, it's not going to do anything, right? So it's a roll of the dice. But if you have so many cells that are multiplying so many times every single day, so of course, if you have a lot of things going on, if you've got a lot of damage going on, you're just upping your chances there. And so anything that causes this sort of damage there is something that we want to avoid, like UV radiation, like toxins, like too much inflammation. Another thing that causes a lot of damage is chemotherapy and radiation. So about 1 in 6 cancer patients develop a second primary cancer years later. What does this mean? A primary cancer means that it's an entirely new cancer. It's not the cancer that they had treated coming back. It is a new cancer that has popped up. This can occur more than 10 years after the initial exposure to the chemotherapy and radiation. All right, so chemotherapy and radiation, it's a known risk. It's going to increase the risks of developing secondary cancers, particularly in, childhood survivors of cancer. That's because, the younger you are, you've got more years to live, which means you have more years to develop cancer. Children who are also still growing as well, their cells are multiplying a lot. They're still developing tissues. There's all of that. It's much more sensitive to this chemotherapy and radiation. But, it is a risk that you have to take, because without it, then, how are you going to survive the cancer? All right. So, a lot of cancers will go undetected until the advanced stages. So people in their minds, they have this image of cancer as a quick disease, but that's because, they really only find it in the late stages, and the treatment for cancer also takes a toll on the body. So the overall impression is that you have someone who is diagnosed with cancer, they could become, really unwell on chemotherapy, radiation, and then, ultimately they pass away because of the cancer, and that time period might not be very long at all. All right, so that's the impression that people get, that, cancer is something that is quick and, terrible. When in reality, cancer is something that can sort of hide in your body for a long period of time. For example, pancreatic cancer is a rare cancer, and yet it's among the top 5 leading causes of cancer death in the United States. About 95% of people diagnosed with pancreatic cancer will die from it. And there is an easy way to explain this. It's because in the vast majority of cases, people don't find pancreatic cancer until it's too late. All right, so you've got 2 types of pancreatic cancer. I'm just gonna split it into 2 types really easily. Your pancreas is it's a long, skinny organ, sort of like sits like this in your body, a long, skinny organ. If you have a cancer in the head of the pancreas, where you have a lot of ducts, you've got a lot of important cells going on, you're more likely to survive, because you're more likely to find it, because when it's growing in the head of the pancreas, it might, block off a duct, and then you get symptoms, and then you find it. However, if you have a cancer in the tail of the pancreas, the other end of the pancreas, where there's not a lot of ducts out, there's not a lot of things to block, that cancer can get to stage 4. It can spread all throughout your body, and you might never find it until it's way too late. Okay, so, and then, people, they get diagnosed with pancreatic cancer when it's already in the end stages. And then, they die very quickly from it after finding out about it. And that contributes to the image of cancer as a really, really quick killer. When in reality, cancer is a super slow and progressive disease. As with many other health conditions like heart disease, cancer is not really something that happens overnight. And the phrase early stage cancer is a little misleading because it can give the patients the impression that cancer is something that has only just occurred in their bodies, so something new in their bodies, when it's likely been in the body for years and years and years. It's just no one knew about it. So sort of like bacteria, cancer cells multiply over time. So it's called a sort of doubling time. It's just how long it takes for a tumor to double in size. So, for bacteria, this doubling time can be minutes. But for cancer cells, it can be a lot longer. All right, so if you have a bacterial infection, you might notice it you might notice it pretty quickly because it's going to cause symptoms pretty quickly. And you might also notice it getting worse pretty quickly as well because bacteria multiply really, really fast. The doubling time is pretty short. But if you have like a cancer cell there, it can remain asymptomatic until the really advanced stages. It can take a long, long, long time to grow. So let's just say that, you have a tumor that has a doubling time that's got, a 20-day doubling time. It might take 2 years to become a detectable tumor, whereas one with a 200-day doubling time could take a whopping 20 years. And then here's the kicker. Cancer cells, they're not uniform. Even when you take cancer cells from like someone and you look at it under the microscope, none of them look normal. You can find cancer cells in one bit that look like one way and then another bit that looks like something else entirely. All right, so they're not uniform. They do not act the same. So, they're not all going to double the same either. So take breast cancer, for example. It can have a doubling time anywhere from 50 to 200 days. So if you're diagnosed with breast cancer today, it could have been chilling in your body from anywhere from 5 to 20 years before it made its presence known. And lung cancer, well, that can have a doubling time anywhere from 70 days to like over a year. Crazy, right? This means that if someone is diagnosed with lung cancer in their 40s or older, that cancer could have been doing its thing in their body since their 20s. All right, so just don't fall under the impression that cancer only appears in older people. Younger people could still have cancer in their bodies. They just don't know about it yet. All right, so our imaging techniques, like you've seen, photos or videos of CT scans or MRI scans, right? They seem super impressive. They seem super high tech. But unfortunately, we still have limitations to our technology. For example, an X-ray can only see something that's about 10 to 20 millimeters. CT scan is slightly better. It can detect something that's 4 to 6 millimeters, all right? But just because it can detect it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to look at the scan and actually recognize it as a cancer, because when you do these sort of scans, there's a lot of things to look out for, and there's a lot of things like artifacts, which is basically things that come up on the scan that don't actually exist in real life. It's just an artifact of the scan. So a tumor usually divides about 30 times to grow to about 10 millimeters, and that's about 100 million cells before it can be detected by something like an X-ray. All right, so that's a lot of cancer cells. And cancer, it can be really asymptomatic until the advanced stages. So, just because it's detectable by these sort of advanced scans doesn't mean that, you have reason to actually go looking for it. And if you don't have reason to go looking for it, it can be really, really easy to miss, even if it comes up on the scan. For example, like I mentioned pancreatic cancer already. Lung cancer as well, the symptoms can be really, really general, like a cough, shortness of breath. There's a lot of things that can cause cough and shortness of breath. You might have more severe symptoms like, chest pain when breathing, but this can be tricky as well because our lungs don't actually have a lot of pain sensitive areas. I know it sounds crazy. The most sensitive areas is actually the lining of the lung. So a lot of times, early tumors can grow and grow and grow and grow, and then it gets huge, and you're just like, I just feel a little bit short of breath. I just got a little bit of a persistent cough. You don't really notice it. And then, it brushes against the lining of your lung, and you're like, what is this pain? And then you go in and get it checked out, right? So, but at that point, it's already grown to a significant size. It's the same thing with other cancer as well, like ovarian cancers is also known for being, super silent because your ovaries are located deep within your pelvic cavity. And like people with polycystic ovaries might know, you can get like huge cysts on your ovaries, and there's a lot of space for things to grow down there. So, you can have the cancer can just keep growing and growing and growing until it becomes really large, or it starts to compress on other organs. It starts to invade other organs, and that's why you start feeling symptoms. Kidney cancer as well, colorectal cancer, liver cancer is all the same. It's just deep in the abdomen where there's a lot of space for things to grow. When the symptoms are, very, very general, like kidney cancer can be, blood in the urine. It can be lower back pain. How many people get lower back pain? Unexplained weight loss, etc. You can just have a decrease in kidney function, which people don't actually notice because your kidneys compensate for it so well. Colorectal cancer as well. People always, think, if I have colorectal cancer, I'm gonna have blood in my feces. But the thing about that is that the blood in your feces is not bright red. It's not going to be obvious. It's going to be mixed in. It can be such minuscule amounts that you're never going to notice without, a specific test looking for it. All right, liver cancer as well. It can grow to amazing sizes before it starts causing significant issues because, again, your liver is really, really good at compensating for any loss of function. And so, it's really, really easy for cancer to be misdiagnosed, to be missed for something more common and less serious. So doctors will misdiagnose about 28% of cancer patients by just, brushing off symptoms, making assumptions. Maybe they're just too over-specialized. You go to a doctor that's looking at the lungs and they're going to be focused on the lungs. They're going to be thinking of the lungs. They're not really going to be thinking of other things. Doctors are also, very, very overworked. They don't really have a lot of time with patients. You might go in for something like, I've been feeling like generally like a little bit unwell, and then the doctors will just think, okay, yeah, I've been having a little bit of stomach issues. They might think, oh, okay, maybe you've got, a stomach issue, something wrong with your stomach, maybe something wrong with your colon, when in fact it's something going on, deeper inside in a different organ. there might be faulty tools and processes. So, it's actually quite easy to miss cancer. So when it comes down to it, we don't want to get to this point where, we're on a cat and mouse chase of trying to find the cancer and treat it. What we really want to do is try to prevent the cancer from happening to begin with. All right, so a healthy lifestyle can help reduce overall cancer risk, even in people who have a high genetic risk of cancer. So it really just comes down to it. All right, so nearly half of cancer deaths could be prevented with lifestyle changes. So when it comes down to preventing cancer, it's not really, it's something that's super accessible to everyone. You don't have to, come up with some miracle drug. You don't have to do some, huge change to your lifestyle. It's not really something that's out of your grasp. All right, so there's an estimated 40% of cancer cases and almost 50% of cancer deaths among US adults in 2019 were attributable to preventable risk factors. So it comes down to things that we can all work on in our daily life, that we can all work on to prevent. First one is drink modestly. There is no amount of good alcohol. I know a lot of people will think, okay, what if it's herbal wine? What if it's like red wine? I've heard that is good for you, right? No, it's not. Doesn't matter what it is, alcohol is carcinogenic. There is no completely safe level of alcohol consumption. Drinking alcohol is linked to a higher risk of at least 7 different types of cancer. For example, breast, liver, colorectal, oral cavity, pharynx, portion of the throat here behind your mouth, larynx, your voice box, also here, esophageal cancers, etc. The type of drink doesn't matter. It is the alcohol content. Okay, so as long as there is alcohol, it's going to increase the risk of cancer. Any drink that contains alcohol will increase the risk. All right, so obviously if you drink more, you're going to increase the risk, but any amount of alcohol is dangerous. Even just 1 glass of wine a day can increase the risk. All right, so studies have shown that 1 or 2 drinks a day can increase the risk of developing prostate cancers by 8% compared to people who don't drink at all. Postmenopausal breast cancer risk increases by about 11% for every standard alcoholic drink a day. So people who have the Asian flush, that alcohol flush syndrome, meaning that if you drink alcohol, you flush red, they're actually more at risk for cancers. That's because, this flush reaction is caused by a lack of an enzyme that helps break down alcohol. The enzyme is called aldehyde dehydrogenase 2. This means that people who have this flush reaction are not breaking down alcohol very well, meaning that the toxic portions of alcohol are hanging around in their body more. It's hanging around, causing damage, causing the flush. All right, so people should just avoid alcohol in general, especially people who flush red when drinking. And it's not just drinking alcohol as well. You also want to avoid foods that are cooked with alcohol, because a lot of people think that cooking food burns off all of the alcohol, but it doesn't, not necessarily. All right, so the main ways alcohol causes cancer is that it damages the cells. All right, alcohol in itself is damaging to your cells, every part of the process, even when it's, getting broken down, the metabolites of alcohol still damaging your cells. It also alters hormone secretion as well and increases the levels of estrogen and insulin, which means that the cells divide more. And of course, when you're forcing cells to divide more when they really shouldn't be, you're running the risk of cells, making more mistakes in the DNA, which can eventually lead to cancer. All right, so the other thing that we want to talk about is that, if you smoke and you drink, it's even worse. All right. The combined effect causes greater damage to cells, and you have a higher risk of mouth and upper throat cancers. So alcohol damages the cells in your mouth and throat, and these damaged cells can absorb cancer-causing chemicals from tobacco smoke more easily. All right. So I'm not just talking about tobacco smoke, all right? E-cigarettes aerosol can also contain compounds that may increase the risk of cancer, but it's still very, very, very new, all right? And I mean, like, imagine years and years and years ago, people were in denial that cigarettes would cause lung cancer. There would be doctors smoking in hospitals. So, of course, with something so new, there's still a lot of data that we need, still a lot of research that we need to do, and that only comes with time. But it's always worth it to quit smoking. Quitting smoking at any age significantly reduces the risk of lung cancer and other cancers. It also protects other people. Smokers who stop after a cancer diagnosis they improve their healing time, they improve their treatment response, and they cut the risk of dying from cancers. So it is always something that is worth it. No matter what age you are, no matter how long you've been smoking, it's always worth it to make the effort to stop. Next up is don't eat moldy foods. I can't believe I have to tell people this, but just don't. Okay? A lot of it might not even be on purpose, because, what we're worried about is something called aflatoxins, all right? And aflatoxin is a mycotoxin that is found in a lot of common food items like corn, rice, nuts, spices. And, why do I say it's not really on purpose? It's because if you buy a giant, bag of corn, of rice, nuts, etc., you're not going to examine every little grain, every piece of corn, right? And there might be mold hidden somewhere there, and you just eat it inadvertently. All right, so aflatoxin, it's a potent carcinogen, meaning that it's a potent substance that can cause cancer. All right, so it's found in these common food items. And then I've also heard people who think, okay, like, what if I don't eat those things at all? What if I don't eat any of these, grains, these sort of things? What if I only eat meat? People can also be exposed to aflatoxins through consuming meats or, even dairy products, because animals who eat these things, who eat, feed contaminated with aflatoxins, they will absorb it into their body, and it can permeate into their meat. It can get into the dairy products, so you can be exposed that way as well. Exposure to aflatoxins increases the risk of liver cancer and has been associated with other cancer types, and it can cause mutations or even birth defects as well. So, if you find moldy food, you can't really wash it off. Aflatoxins are often, deeply embedded into the food, meaning that you can't really wash it off. High temperatures used in cooking, it's not enough to completely destroy them. Therefore, if you find mold on your food, it's not good enough to just, remove the molded bit. It's not good enough to just cut off the molded bit, because people don't realize is that the bit that you can see the mold, that's their reproductive organs, okay? The main portion of the mold, it's deep inside. It's already there. If you just cut off the bit that you can see, you're just leaving all the bits that's already deep inside your food. So if you can see the mold, just don't eat it, please. All right. Next up is eat more fiber, drink more water. So the American Institute for Cancer Research recommends at least 30 grams of fiber daily to lower cancer risk. All right, so that's just an average. Other institutes will recommend other numbers, but I feel like 30 grams is an easy number to remember. All right, so I know I say 30 grams, but people don't really know how much that is. All right, so just let me give you an example. One medium apple with the skin contains about 3.7 grams of fiber. All right, so which means to get all the 30 grams that you want in a day, you need to eat about 8 apples with the skin. Do you eat 8 apples with the skin worth of fiber a day? No, probably not. A lot of people don't. So fiber is something that we do have to make a little bit more effort to eat. You know, there's a lot of foods that will contain fiber, and like, for example, psyllium husk, apples contain fiber. A lot of, fruits and veggies will contain a lot of fiber. We know what doesn't contain fiber. Animal products do not contain fiber. Meat does not contain fiber. All right, so, it is something that we do want to put a little bit more effort into eating. So fiber helps reduce colorectal cancer risk by promoting regular bowel movements, which means that harmful substances that are there, they are spending less time in contact with your intestinal walls. And fiber also helps feed the helpful gut bacteria and promotes compounds that these helpful bacteria will produce, like butyrate, which helps keeps the colon cells healthy. Additionally, a high fiber diet can also help you control your weight, reducing the risk of obesity-related cancers. All right, so it is something that we can always make more of an effort to eat more of. So use cooking oils with a high smoke point. All right, a lot of people, like some of the things I mentioned earlier, like don't drink, don't smoke, everyone knows that. But what people don't really know about is that your cooking oil matters when it comes to, reducing your cancer risk. So you want to use cooking oils with a high smoke point. And what does the smoke point mean? Every oil has a smoke point, the temperature at which it starts to smoke. All right, when it reaches this temperature, when it starts to smoke, it's starting to break down, and it's producing harmful compounds like malondialdehyde, which can increase the cancer risk. All right, so to reduce the cancer risk, you want to use oils that have a really high smoke point, and you also really want to think about the type of cooking that you're doing. All right, so I've seen people who are trying to make like Asian stir fry with olive oil. I sort of get the logic there. People think of olive oil, they think it's how fragrant it is. And they also read things about how, it's a healthy oil for you to use in your cooking, right? So then people will think, okay, like what if I just use it in my cooking? But no, olive oil has a really, really low smoke point. There's a reason why people use it to like dip bread in, to sprinkle on salads, and you don't really cook with it. Right? Especially look at the Asian cooking. We're using it like over high fire, lots of heat. It can reach over 200 degrees Celsius. So, please don't use things like olive oil. You want to use things like macadamia oil or perilla seed oil, things that have a really, really high smoke point, ideally over 200 degrees Celsius. The other thing you don't want to do is you don't want to reuse cooking oils, because every time you use a cooking oil, it breaks down a little bit more, and that smoke point is also going to lower. And that's also why you don't want to use the same cooking oil over a long period of time as well, because again, it's going to lower the smoke point. All right, and this is something that is really important to keep in mind, because cooking oil is something that comes into contact with a lot of the food that you're going to eat. So if you get it wrong, what you're doing then is that you're contaminating a lot of the food that you're going to eat, that you're cooking for your family or friends. All of it's just contaminated with something that could actually be harmful to their health. We also want to eat less red meat. Eating red meat can increase the risk of stomach, breast, and bowel cancers, because red meat contains something called N-glycolinuramic acid. I know it's a long word. And this causes inflammation, and it lowers immune function. So, remember what I said before? We want to avoid inflammation. And immune function is really important to us, because we actually have we have specialized cells in our immune system whose job is to hunt down these abnormal, these weird looking, these mutated cells. They hunt them down, and then they attack them and they kill them. That's a function of our immune system. All right, so we do want to avoid things that are going to increase inflammation and harm our immune system. We want to eat more plant-based foods. The American Cancer Society says that eating lots of fruit and vegetables can help reduce your cancer risk. In general, those with the most color have the most nutrients. Because, a lot of this color means that, you're getting all sorts of different types of nutrients there. Phytochemicals can help prevent tumor growth and decrease the production of cancer-related hormones. And phytochemicals are found in plant foods and mushrooms. All right, so just like this little picture here, you want a wide variety of nutrients there. You want that wide variety of colors, because every color means that you're getting something slightly different, which means that you're attacking cancer from all sorts of different angles and not just one angle. Exercise helps prevent cancer. Regular exercise reduces cancer risk by modulating hormones, boosting your immune function, and reducing inflammation, according to the American Cancer Society. And increased physical activity is linked to a lower risk of breast, prostate, colon, endometrial, possibly pancreatic cancer. So many different types of cancers. All right, so it is something that we do want to get more of. And I'm not saying, you have to go to the gym 3 times a week. You have to go really hard. No, I'm not saying things like that. I'm saying things like, just moderate exercise. There's a lot of estimates out there. For example, there's an estimate that says if you have 45 minutes of moderate exercise a day, like walking, just walking, it can significantly lower the chances of developing various types of cancer. All right, so you don't need to go hard. All you have to do is just, walk a little bit more. And next time, take the stairs instead of the escalator. Walk instead of taking a short taxi ride, things like that. Because it's not just cancer, exercise slows down cell aging. So people who exercise live longer than those who do not. Regular exercise reduces the rate of telomere shortening, which slows the biological clock. So if you have younger cells, you're going to have better immune function, which means you're going to have improved cancer protection. And I know, people who say, oh yeah, of course, I know that people who exercise live longer than people who do not. Look at these mice. They are the same age. One of these mice have exercise. The other one did not. The difference is stark, okay? So yes, a lot of people will say, oh yeah, I know exercise helps me stay younger, but it helps a lot. Look at these mice. Which one do you want to be? All right, I know which one I want to be. All right, so it makes a significant difference. All right, next up, we want to maintain a healthy weight. Obesity contributes to 1 in 5 cancer deaths. All right, so there is a very strong link between obesity and cancer. Excess body fat increases the risk of colorectal, breast, uterine, esophageal, kidney, and pancreatic cancer. All right, so this can happen in a lot of ways. People think that it might be due to the inflammation that's caused by the excessive visceral fat. An excessive amount of fat also takes up more space, and all of that space taken up means that there's less space for oxygen. Low oxygen means that there's more inflammation. More inflammation means that there's more damage to cells, more damage to DNA, more damage to tissues, et cetera, which can develop mutations, which can then lead to cancer. Obesity can also affect your hormones, which can also contribute to cancer risk. All right, so it's really important for us to maintain a healthy weight. So obesity increases the chances of a lot of different types of cancer. All right, so we can't eliminate all the carcinogens out there. For example, we're living in the world that we're living in. We have to be exposed to UV radiation. For example, we can't never go outside, right? The sun is there. we do need the sun for vitamin D. So it's not like we can avoid it forever. If you live in a city, you're going to breathe in air pollution. What are you going to do? Not breathe, right? There's a lot of unavoidable things in our environment, but that's okay. Because our body has ways of taking care of itself. Our body has ways of finding cancer cells and killing them before they become a problem. Our body has ways of correcting mutations in our genes, and all we really have to do is just take care of our body, just enable our body to be able to do what it does best. So just remember that the majority of cancers are caused by lifestyle factors. It's not bad luck. All right. So, a lot of people will just think, oh, it's just bad luck that, this has happened to you, or, it's just bad luck. All right. But I feel like that's, like you're not really fully taking responsibility for it. All right. So about 70% of the 5.3 million premature deaths from cancer in 2020 were preventable. All right, I don't want people to think that, oh, it's just bad luck, because that gives me the impression that, oh, there's nothing that they could have done to prevent it. And when people have that sort of impression that there's nothing they can do to prevent it, they don't do anything. All right, when there's a lot of things that can be done to prevent such a horrible disease. And it's just everything that I've all gone through already. There's so many things that each of us can do. It's not something that is out of reach. It's not something that you even have to spend a lot of money on. You don't have to buy, some miracle pill that someone's pushing on you. You don't have to, completely overhaul your lifestyle. You don't have to wait for scientists to come up with, some elixir of life. It's all things that each of us have the power to do right now. And it's easy things like eat more plant foods, cut down on your animal products, maintain a healthy body weight, drink moderately or just not drink at all, don't smoke, exercise, sleep well, and be happy. So all of these things that we can do to prevent cancer, it's all just within our reach. And a lot of what we can do today, I feel like, to help us and other people is to just let people know, these are all sorts of things that you may not have thought of that could cause cancer later on in life, like don't hang out in basements because of radon gas. Moldy foods, it's not enough to just cut off a bit of it. You want to keep a mind on the smoke points of oil, etc., etc. All these little things, very, very much within our control. Very, very much something that, we can use to have a positive impact on other people as well. So each of us, we can choose to have a healthy lifestyle starting today. And it's all things that we can do to hopefully protect ourselves from cancer in the future.
Now we will answer some questions from the audience. Please state your question in the live chat section. Kindly avoid asking questions about personal illnesses and ask each question only once. Dr. Ii, will coffee enema help people who have severe gastrointestinal issues, such as acid reflux, bloating, and constipation?
Generally, enemas, the only thing enemas really going to help with is constipation, and that's only if you're doing the sort of medical enemas that people do. A coffee enema is not going to do anything for you whatsoever in regards to your health. I'm just going to be straight up here. No misunderstanding. A coffee enema is absolutely useless for your health and could actually do more harm than good. All right? Just so that we're clear. All right, if you have gastrointestinal issues like acid reflux, an enema is not going to help you. All right, it's the wrong end that you're looking at. Okay, let me break it down little by little. All right, acid reflux. All right, I suffer from acid reflux. I get acid reflux a lot. So the thing about acid reflux is that there's a lot of causes that can cause acid reflux. For example, your stomach could just be producing too much acid. For some people, certain foods can trigger acid reflux, and the same food isn't the same for every single person. So it comes down to sort of like just experience, knowing what triggers your acid reflux and what doesn't. All right, and if you find out that there is something that is triggering your acid reflux, you just gotta avoid that food, okay? So there are, for example, there are other things that can cause your acid reflux as well. For example, some people could have a hiatus hernia, which is when, how do I explain this easily? So your chest cavity and your abdominal cavity are separated by your diaphragm. All right, it's not just one continuous cavity. All right, so you got your diaphragm here, got your chest cavity, abdominal cavity, and you got the tubes going through. All right, you got your esophagus that goes through your diaphragm. You got other, tubes going through like blood vessels, etc. But let's just think about the esophagus. Esophagus goes through your diaphragm and into the stomach, which sits underneath your diaphragm. Sometimes this hole is too big. All right, which means that your stomach can bubble up through. All right, and if your stomach is bubbling up through and it's got a lot of stomach acid in it, which it should, that's normal, that's natural and normal. This stomach acid can also bubble through and cause the symptoms of acid reflux. Sometimes the acid reflux is caused by a weak sphincter there because you have your esophagus and you have your stomach here underneath you. Like just imagine that my hand is your sphincter. All right, you got your esophagus and then your stomach just sort of sitting here. All right, so acid sits in your stomach without an issue because your stomach has adapted to the acid. It's got a special lining there. It's got a special layer of mucus. So your stomach isn't going to get hurt by the acid. Acid reflux is when the acid gets up into your esophagus. Your esophagus does not have the protections of your stomach, okay? Which means that when the acid gets up through your esophagus is burning. That is what causing the pain, the symptoms of your acid reflux. Normally, the sphincter is, nice and tight. It's only relaxing to get food, liquid through, and then it closes up tight afterwards to keep everything in the stomach as it should. Sometimes the sphincter is too loose and it allows this acid to bubble up into the esophagus and causing this acid reflux. All right, so if you have a weak sphincter there are ways to fix it, and those ways are surgery. Surgery can go in and fix this weak sphincter. All right, if it's not super weak, if you don't want to go through surgery, then there are a lot of medical methods as well to help lower the amount of acid in your stomach, but that also comes with different side effects. So it really depends on the severity of your acid reflux. For some people, changing their diet is enough to control their acid reflux symptoms. If you have bloating, if you have constipation, that's a different part of your gastrointestinal tract. That is your colon. So your stomach empties into your small intestine, which then empties into your large colon. A lot of bloating and constipation is happening in your colon. All right, so bloating also has a lot of causes. All right, so it's a lot of things out there, but I find what helps the most with bloating is just to take care of your gut bacteria. All right, so a lot of people who have abnormal bloating, like too much gas stuck in there, a lot of the gas is produced by the bacteria that is living in your colon, all right? And if you are eating a lot of things that your bacteria just aren't used to, if your bacteria are just not in balance, they're not super healthy, it can just keep producing a lot of gas. All right, so what you want to do with bloating and constipation is you want to eat more fiber. All right, it's an easy fix. You just want to eat more fiber. I do have to warn you though that like if you are coming from a diet that is very, very low in fiber and you're suddenly eating a huge amount of fiber, you're going to get bloating. Right, that's going to happen. So what I want you to do instead of doing that is increase the amount of fiber that you take in slowly, gradually, to give your gut bacteria a chance to adjust. All right, so if you do it slowly, it should help out with these issues. But what really does not help is any sort of coffee enema, any sort of blank enema is not going to help with any of these issues except for constipation. I know that doctors will give people really strong enemas to clear out their colon. Okay, so if you've got really bad constipation, you could go to the doctor to get an enema that may help with this, but it's not going to be pleasant. All right, so that's the only thing that I could imagine that it's going to help. But I'm talking about, the medical enemas, not coffee enemas or whatever random thing enemas. That's not going to help at all.
Dr. EE, can children consume coffee or drinks that contain caffeine?
So it's recommended that children should avoid caffeine until they're a little bit older. All right. So if you have kids, you can just let them have a taste every so often, but ideally we want them to avoid caffeine until they're a little bit older. And just plus, your children already have so much energy. Do you really want to give them more caffeine?
Dr. EE, is eczema an allergy or an autoimmune disease?
So eczema is something that is within the allergic trio, all right? So it comes with eczema, hay fever, and asthma. All right, so it's considered under the umbrella of allergies. So there's a lot of people don't actually know what exactly causes eczema. It's still one of those things that is really hard to pinpoint, but it comes down to something like like asthma, like hay fever, which is an inappropriate response of the immune system, plus just an abnormal function of the barrier function of your skin. All right, so eczema is something that can happen in childhood. It can happen in adulthood as well. And the main thing about eczema is to keep it moisturized and to, maintain your skin barrier. Because a lot of research shows is that people who have eczema or other, similar skin conditions, it's not entirely down to the abnormal responses of the immune system, but it's also there's something a bit funny about the barrier function of their skin. All right, so our skin's main purpose is to form a barrier between, the inside of us and the outside world. And normally it does a really great job at this. It keeps the bad stuff out. It allows, some of the good stuff in. But if you have abnormal barrier function, what happens then is that it's allowing things that shouldn't be allowed through. And then your immune system is being like, oh, what is this? And it goes after it, all right, even if it's not entirely harmful. All right, so it's a combination of things going on. But with eczema, what you really want to do is that you want to keep it moisturized. All right, you want to protect that skin barrier. There's a lot of things that can set off eczema. For example, I have friends who can't wear wool because it sets off their eczema. Other friends as well, they have, certain types of laundry detergent that they can use and other types that they can't use. Perfume might be also something that sets off eczema. Sweating can set off eczema. So there's a lot of different things that can set it off from person to person. And what we really have to do is just identify these triggers and avoid them. If you have an eczema flare-up, what can help with that is the applications of steroid creams, but that is really something that we want to reserve for when you really, really need it and only in a very, very short term. Otherwise, what we really want to do is just identify these triggers, avoid them, and then just generally try to take care of ourselves otherwise, because people who have these diseases, they tend to come together. Eczema, hay fever, asthma. That's why they tend to come together. So what we want to do is just take care of ourselves in other ways, because when you have these sort of things, your immune system is already going a little bit wonky. So we want to take extra steps, extra care to help, bolster our immune function, making sure that, it's not going haywire so often, that we're supporting its normal functions.
Dr. EE, what is frozen shoulder and how can I prevent it?
So frozen shoulder is a type of bursitis in the shoulder. There are a lot of ways that it can happen, actually. And for some people, it can just happen. All right. But for a lot of people, it can be triggered by inflammation. It can be triggered by previous injury. It can be triggered by a lot of things. All right. So frozen shoulder is just really, really terrible. All right. And it can last for quite a long time as well. But again, it's one of those things in which there's no really easy fix. All right, and one of the main things that I can recommend for people who really want to avoid frozen shoulder or other conditions like it is to just, build up, sorry guys, is to build up the supporting structures around your shoulder. So I know a lot of people will, sorry guys. So I know a lot of people, it's like they run into issues and then they try to fix it or try to prevent it. But that's not really how it should be going about. Like, for example, people who get like really bad lower back pain, it's only when they get the really bad lower back pain that they're thinking of ways of, oh, how can I fix this? Or they have, really bad, hip pain, knee pain, any sort of pain there. What can really help out is to build up the structures around these sort of areas. All right. So, and it really comes down to just strength building exercises and just general physical fitness. All right. So because when you are building up these muscles, you're building up the supporting structures around, you're less likely to do things in a way that's going to cause damage to your joints, to cause damage to any sort of the tissues there, because you have a lot of surrounding structure helping it out, supporting it. For example, people who just let me use like lower back pain for an example. People who have a lot of lower back pain, there's a lot of things that can cause this, but let's just assume it's because of, musculoskeletal issues. You've got lower back pain. So, just take this for example, if I don't exercise at all, I don't have a lot of muscle there. So what happens then is that I start to compensate. I don't have the muscle there to help hold up my spine. So then I start putting on a lot of weight through the muscle, through the bones themselves, through the tendons, through the ligaments themselves. I might not have the greatest posture. I might, sit around like this. I might sit around super slouched. And all of that creates a lot of stress where they really shouldn't be a lot of stress. But then if I start working out my lower back a little bit more, I start building up the muscle there, what happens then is that your muscle will take some of the stress. It will take off some of the stress going through the bones, going through the ligaments, going through the tendons there. You start to be able to maintain a better posture. You start to, allow the force of gravity to go through your spine in the way that it was designed to go through. All right, and by doing that, you will be cutting down on your lower back pain because you have the supporting structures to help take off some of that force. And then when you're walking around, or even when you're lifting heavy things or other things, you're less likely to cause damage. You're less likely to injure yourself because again, you have those supporting structures around. And of course, to be able to build up all of your supporting structures, your supporting muscles, you have to have a healthy diet that supports that as well, with a lot of protein.
Dr. EE, how do microplastics affect us, especially if we need to eat takeaway often?
Oh, microplastics. There's so much research going on in microplastics, and there's so many things going on right now looking into like, oh, like, does it on how it can harm us and, what we can do to avoid it. And really, it's so hard to avoid plastic. It's everywhere. Microplastics are dangerous because they're because they're so small. It is theorized that it can get everywhere into your body. So, if you have like a bigger piece of plastic, it's not going to be able to penetrate the cells. All right, that's what we're worried about with microplastics. That is going to be able to penetrate the cells in our body to even, cause genetic damage, to cause all sorts of damage because it's so small. All right, normally, our cells are very good at, keeping things out. Like all of the things in our body, it's very good at allowing only certain things in and keeping other things away. But what we're finding now more and more and more is that microplastics are able to get into places in our body, these microscopic places where it really shouldn't be. So we're finding all sorts of effects. We're finding, some scientists are finding effects on fertility. Other scientists are finding effects on our hormones. Other scientists are finding other new things. It's such a new area of research. We are constantly finding out new things. And the thing about microplastics is that it's so hard to avoid because it's everywhere now. People have found microplastics in the deepest parts of the ocean. People have found microplastics in babies. It's everywhere, and it's so difficult to avoid. So, if you have to eat takeaway, I mean, it really comes down to the restaurant that you're trying to pick, I guess. If there is a restaurant that could possibly pack away your takeaway in something that is not plastic, remember that styrofoam is a type of plastic. So if there's anything that they could like do it in a something that's not plastic, or maybe you could bring your own takeaway container. If there's it really comes down to the restaurant and just making the concentrated effort to sort of avoid plastics. But I know that's something that is really, really tough to do, but it's really the only thing that we have left on our side, on the individual side, to do.
Dr. EE, should we avoid drinking coffee or tea with meals? Does it interfere with iron absorption?
All right, so if coffee and tea does inhibit iron absorption. So a lot of people think, like, hey, I've heard these sort of things about how I can't have coffee or tea with my meals because it's going to interfere with my iron absorption. And then I'm going to end up with anemia. Therefore, I can't have coffee or tea with meals. And while, yes, there are things in coffee and tea that can interfere with iron absorption in meals, it's not really an issue for a healthy person. So there are the compounds in coffee and tea that interfere with iron absorption are not only found in coffee and tea, it's found in a lot of different plant products as well. So if this is the only thing that you care about, you're going to be cutting out a lot of potentially really nutritional things in your diet because it could interfere with iron absorption. So, this thing is only really relevant if you already have anemia, but even then it's not a significant issue, is what I'm going to say. So for the normal person, we're not going to have any issue getting the amount of iron that we need in a day. All right, so iron is actually also a heavy metal as well. So the polyphenols, which is the stuff in coffee and tea that can interfere with iron absorption, it's an antioxidant. And besides binding to iron, it can also latch on to a lot of other heavy metals as well, which is a good thing, And polyphenols are also found in foods like blueberries, or other different types of berries. It can be found in ginger, olive oil, etc., etc. So it can be found in a lot of different things. All right. And polyphenols, it sort of only impacts non-heme iron, which is a plant-based type of iron, and not really heme iron, which comes from meat sources. So while generally true that it may interfere with iron absorption, it's not really going to interfere to a point where you actually have to be worried about it, where it's going to cause someone to get anemia. That's pretty unlikely. All right, so if someone who has anemia, especially iron deficiency anemia, it's more common in women, and most of the time, it's not because they're not absorbing enough iron. All right, the vast majority of people in the world, we're getting enough iron in our diets. We're absorbing enough iron in our diets. All right, it's not really a concern, especially when we're living somewhere like Singapore. We're very blessed to live in a place like this where we're not really starving. All right, so it's not a significant concern for the vast majority of people, luckily here. So for women especially, if they have iron deficiency anemia, a lot of the time it comes from really heavy period flows. They're losing too much iron, and that is what's causing the iron deficiency anemia. Not absorbing enough iron, it's the other, and they're losing too much iron. All right, so it's not a significant concern. If you're really concerned about it, it doesn't mean that you have to cut off coffee or tea. You can just have it, separate from your meals.
Dr. EE, do calcium supplements prevent osteoporosis?
So calcium supplements, they can help out in osteoporosis, but it's not the entirety of the picture. Calcium supplements alone are not going to help out osteoporosis. All right, so there's a lot of things that will build up our bones. And our bones require not just calcium, but all sorts of other things as well. So if you're lacking in calcium, of course, you're going to have issues with your bones. But if you are good in calcium, but you're lacking in other things, then it's not going to help out as well. So taking calcium supplements are most effective when you combine it with other things. For example, you want to combine it with making sure that you're getting enough vitamin D, you're getting enough physical activity, and you also want to look at your lifestyle factors as well. For example, no smoking, no alcohol, because that can affect your bone health as well. And then when it comes down to it, do you really want calcium supplements when we can get enough calcium through our diet? That's another thing to think of as well, because a lot of people will jump to supplements if they're thinking, oh, I'm lacking in something, rather than thinking, hey, what if I just eat a healthier diet that contains all of my needs, right? So instead of taking the supplements, you could just eat more calcium containing foods. For example, soy contains a lot of calcium. There's a lot of plant foods out there that contain calcium. People always think, oh, it's milk. You've got options, so many options. All right, and another thing people always forget about is exercise. All right, if you don't use your bones, you're gonna lose them. So if you don't put, stress through your bones, your body's gonna think to itself, oh, all right, you're not using it. Why would I waste the energy and resources to maintain it? Whereas if you're doing these sort of, weight-bearing exercises like walking, jogging, strength training, you're just putting forces through your bones. It's going to stimulate bone formation, and it's going to slow bone loss. And another thing you really want to take in is more protein. People always think that as you get older, you need less protein, when in reality, it's the opposite. As you get older, you actually need more protein. All right, so it's not calcium supplements alone. It's a combination of a lot of things that can help out your bones.
Due to time constraints, the next question will be our last question. Dr. EE, why do stressed people have a higher risk for cancer?
All All right, so stressed people have a higher risk of cancer because it's a lot of things altogether. So stressed people will release stress hormones called cortisol, and cortisol actually suppresses your immune system. All right, if you have huge amounts of cortisol all the time, it suppresses your immune system. And remember what I said before about how your immune system works to find cancer cells and destroy them. If your immune system is not working properly, it's not going to find these cancer cells. It's not going to destroy them, okay? And when you're stressed as well, everything is out of whack. You've got, your hormonal systems will also be out of whack. And all of these things are just not balanced. When it comes down to it, our stress response in humans, it was only ever designed for a life-saving situation. For example, in ancient times, if you were facing a tiger, you would be stressed. All right, all of these responses then are designed to save your life. All right, it's shuttling blood away from non-essential areas to essential areas. All of these things are heightening your awareness, making you breathe faster, your heart pump faster. Your pupils will dilate to take in more of your surroundings. You're not so aware of pain because you can't be if you want to live. All right, so all of these things are designed in a very short-term way to get you out of that situation so that you can go back to your normal life. All right, because for the human body, for a lot of humans, evolutionary in the past, the ultimate goal was to be fat and relaxed. All right, that's why we like sugar and fat. Just it's in our DNA, literally. It's what has gotten us to survive over time is to seek out, things that will make us fat and relaxed. The goal in life, basically. All right, so these stress responses were never designed to be over a long period of time. But then in our modern style of living, we actually have all of this low levels of stress all the time, and it's not something that our body was adapted for. So if we keep having these just low levels of stress, or even high levels of stress all the time, without adequate periods of relaxation to let our body just let go of that stress and relax, it has a lot of knock-on effects. All right, so it's not just, messing with our hormones, messing with the balance in our body, messing with our immune system, causing increased inflammation in our body, interfering with our sleep. It also comes down to how people manage their stress as well. Some people may manage their stress by indulging in unhealthy habits like, stress eating. They may drink too much, they may smoke too much. All of it is bad. If you're super stressed as well, you might indulge in too many unhealthy foods. You might not feel it in yourself to exercise a little bit more. All of these things will just build up over time to contribute to diseases, not just cancer, but other things like heart disease or even diabetes as well. So it just comes down to basically our bodies are not designed to manage this sort of stress over a long period of time, and our unhealthy coping mechanisms.
Thank you, Dr. EE, for taking your time to educate us regarding health today.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your Saturdays to listen to me go on and on and on. I hope it was both informative and entertaining.
Thank you, everyone, for watching. This video will be accessible until November 13th, 9 a.m. Take care and stay safe.